the Committee for One Fighting Transit Union. At LA Metro, we are seeking to unite TCU Local 1315, ATU 1277, and the Smart Locals into fighting unions, into one fighting union, and also individually into 3 fighting unions until such time as we can merge. But in order to get the merger going, we have started a petition. This is a petition that's going to be presented to the presidents or the head of each various union. It's very simple. It says, "We, the members of ATU TCU, petition to merge with TCU ATU in accordance with the AFL-CIO Constitution, Article 3, Section 8. Affiliates of the Federation shall be encouraged to eliminate conflicts and duplications in organization and jurisdictions through the process of voluntary agreements and voluntary merger. As long as we are divided, Metro can play us one off against the other, encouraging conflict between our unions to drive down our wages and benefits. United we are stronger." And that's it for the petition. But there have been a lot of questions that people have asked. And people have wanted to know a bit more of what's going on. And so we've created this video gathering together all the questions that we've been asked and highlighting some that we think are very important to address into this frequently asked questions video. So please, if you have any more questions besides what we're answering here, you can put it in the comments below and we will do our best to try and answer them. Okay, let's start with the most basic of questions, of course. What are the benefits of one union? Well, the company has us divided between race, based on gender, based on tier and craft, and it also has us divided by unions. Now this, at contract times, becomes the most clear, and we just have this contract with the ATU. Currently the TCU is voting on their contract, but what happened first is the company gets to decide who to have their negotiations with first. They had their negotiations first with ATU, who did their best to keep it quiet from the rest of the company until the signatures were done. And that locks up the ATU. So then the company can then go to the TCU and say, "See, it's all done. This is what the ATU got. There's no way that you can expect anything more than that." Plus, they keep each of us in our little silos, ignorant of the other unions and everything that is going on, which only plays to the hand of the company when they do their attacks and leave everybody feeling isolated and without backup. So another question is, you say to organize and merge ATU, TCU, and SMART. What about AFSCME supervisors? What about Teamsters security guards? Well, let's take a look first at the supervisors and see what do they do? Of course, they supervise, but what that means is that they try to get you workers to do work in the way that Metro wants, right? So that also means that if there's a speed up, they're enforcing the speed. That also means if there's a crackdown, say on cell phones, they're enforcing the crackdown on cell phones. Now let's think about what if there's a speed up and you're not complying with it, and they bring you up on discipline. They put you on a step as a result of that. And you want your union to be there to represent you against this discipline. But the supervisor's on the same union as you. They very well might turn around and say, "No, this is a fight between union members and it's not our business to defend one and to take one side against the other, to defend one side against the other." So we need a union to protect us against such attacks that are coming from the company, through the force of the supervisors, which exactly shows which side the supervisors are on in this whole mess. The fact that ATU 1277 has organized the supervisors of train dispatchers along with those train dispatchers over at Metrolink is a travesty to basic trade unionism, and we ought to kick those supervisors out. So what about the Teamsters? Well, the Teamsters are security guards. That means they protect private property. They protect Metro property. Well, on the day-to-day, this might not seem particularly obvious, but come strike time, this becomes an important question, because actually a strike is a violation of private property. The company says they want you to work and, go into the shop, do your thing, go home after 8 hours, and you say no. And not only are you not going to work, but you're going to stop others from getting to work. That's what a picket line is supposed to be, to stop scabs from coming in and doing the work. Well, then you're going to have security guards, not just security guards, cops as well, coming in to try and enforce the property rights of Metro, and historically, extremely bloodily. So we actually are on the other side, again, of the line from the security guards. Now, when we call to merge unions, some people get the idea that actually we should go the other way. We should split into smaller and smaller unions. In particular, they're probably thinking about their own position and the desire to defend their own position and increase their wages. So, for example, splitting rail from bus. Actually, this is something that SMART just did local-wise. They had 5 locals, now they have 6 because they split the rail local off from a bus. And I've also heard from Traction Power, who look at IBEW that organizes electrical workers and think they make better pay, so we ought to split, that Traction Power group ought to split and join IBEW. Well, in fact, at one point you may be able to get a small wage gain out of such a split, but actually you're undermining the wage gains not only for yourself, but for everybody in the long run. The company likes to give more and more splits, and the union leadership has often been totally fine with that, which is why in the ATU as well as the TCU, there's many different layers of different craft types with all different pay scales. Because for them, it's a lot cheaper to give $1 raise to a dozen people than it is to give 50-cent raise to thousands, obviously. And so they like to be able to pick off just a small little amount of people in order to keep the cheap end in the long run. But if we want to turn around and actually fight to not just get an extra $1, but actually get enough to be able to live on in the city, to be able to live where we work, to and buy property close to the workplace where we all know what the prices are, well, that will take an actual real fight. And in order to do that, we need all the power we can get. And the prime part of the power is actually in the operators who can stop buses and trains immediately. And we need that in ATU. TCU most certainly needs that kind of power. And to do that, we need to unify the whole workforce and utilize all the power, strike with one fist against the company. One of the questions that we often get, and in fact, Art Aguilar, now he's a VP in DC, former local president of ATU 1277, had said, well, if SMART merges with ATU, SMART has a lot more operators, a lot more people within that union, so the operators are going to take over. And won't that give the operators an advantage? Often this is said with a kind of hypothetical that, well, if the operators take over, or if they're more numerous, and there's a contract proposal that gives them more money than mechanics, then the vote will pass and mechanics will be hurt as a result. Well, in fact, this kind of game Metro can do right now much more efficiently with divided unions. Because they get to choose who to negotiate with first, they can pick it apart and they try to win over the small group ahead of time and go to the other groups and say this is all a done deal. So that's something they can do, but they have a lot more maneuverability and a lot more choice right now with the unions divided. But also the question of raising, again, the wages for everybody means we need the power from everybody. Having us at each other's throat for an extra 50 cents is exactly where the company wants us. So another question that is posed has been well, if operators are more numerous than mechanics and supposedly they take over, then they don't know the needs of mechanics. You have an operator president who doesn't know the needs of the mechanics. First of all, we're not saying here that there can't be a specific officer who's tasked with dealing with mechanics and a separate one tasked with dealing with operators. Obviously, if we merge, the size of the union will go up quite large. And right now, in ATU 1277, we only have 5 officers. Clearly, we're going to need more officers than that. But let's put that aside too. The question of the president needing to know exactly the work that the mechanic does. Well, actually, what you need is a leadership that's actually paying attention and listening to the workforce. You don't need a leader that knows how long it takes to change a brake shoe. What you need is one who's willing to fight against the company if they demand a speed up and if they demand that a brake shoe be done faster than mechanics are telling you it can actually be done. So also, people are saying, well, we have, in the ATU, it's a much more democratic union than if you look at SMART or TCU. Well, I think in the ATU we have a lot of anti-democratic processes as well, but there is truth to that fact, no doubt. What this gets to is the fact that we're not actually talking about merging the three unions as they stand and as they are. We are calling for one fighting transit union. So that means that we need to gather all the unions together, right? Because it's like an army. We have the Navy, the Air Force, and the Marines. And they're all fighting against each other, right? For the rations. That's what we're doing right now. But in fact, we need to merge these together so that we are not being pitted against each other. Okay, but the point of merging an army together is to fight. And so, therefore, we can take from the company and increase the income, the benefits for all of us. Having this petition for one fighting union has started the ball rolling already to challenge the leadership. And that's the very reason why the leaders right now of all these three unions opposes this. You could think, well, for ATU, they should all be in favor because it widens their dues base by so much. But not only do they oppose it now, they've opposed it in the past. And, to them, this question of actually needing to change the whole situation of the union, become a fighting union, is what threatens their leadership position, and that's what they are afraid of. So if we merge, won't we get bumped in seniority? This is, of course, a question that comes up a lot, and is probably a big part of the fear that many ATU members in particular have if the unions merge. I am definitely for one seniority list, and there are cases within the TCU where there's not even one seniority list within the TCU. This is just another way, again, to pit different groups against each other. But we're also talking about creating one fighting union. So in order to fight, we can fight for other things besides just the merger of the unions. And one of them that will benefit everybody and that will also deal with this problem of bumping if people move over is to fight for more jobs for all. Open up hiring. And in fact, this is something that Metro wants to do. They want to try and hire because there is a lot of expansion going on. But the problem is they pay so little that people don't want to work here. So you have to raise the wages and increase hiring. Also, tomorrow, if we merged, there's not going to be a lot of movement. Mainly, I think the question comes from people taking advantage of the JAC program to get some training, and then 6 months, a year later, are in a position to bump. But the only place where there's some immediate question here is custodians and service attendants. TCU custodians and ATU service attendants do very similar jobs, and tomorrow could switch from one to the other. So I think the main answer to that is that this should be equal pay for equal work. The fact that the custodians are making less than the service attendants is not beneficial to the ATU service attendants either, who are then told by Metro, you should be happy for what you're getting right now because you're doing better than they are. Not to mention it creates this hostility and this worry that we're seeing against one union as a whole, and that's exactly where the Metro wants you. So if you were to equalize, equal pay for equal work is a typical trade union demand that we should be fighting for. And that would lessen the burden and the desire for people to move around. And of course, in that case, some people from service attendants might want to become custodians if there's no loss in pay or position as well. So in order to merge, don't we first have to go non-union for a year? This is, back in 2014, I believe was the time when it happened, the SMART union started a petition inside and they wanted to join ATU. And they approached Art Aguilar, the president at the time, and asked to merge, and he told them, you're going to be non-union for a year and the company's going to fuck you. Well, where this comes from is the AFL-CIO Constitution. And in the AFL-CIO Constitution, it has a clause that's called the anti-rating clause, where each member of the AFL-CIO says they will not take over a workforce from another member of the AFL-CIO. And since the TCU, SMART, and ATU are all part of the AFL-CIO, they're not allowed to switch the work, not allowed to move from one workforce in one union to another union. And the way that people have gone around this in the past is to decertify for a lengthy period, at least a year, and then the ATU is then open to do a union election to certify that now non-union workforce. Well, this is not the method we want to go. I would call this the takeover method, because basically you're saying, regardless of what the leadership of SMART in that case thinks, we're going to get ATU to come in and take over. What we're talking about actually is the merger method. So there's another section of the AFL-CIO Constitution that calls for and talks about voluntary merger in the case of duplication or conflict. Now the union might say, the leadership might say, that we don't have a case of duplication or conflict here because each is in their own separate workforces. Well, I would argue, in fact, that we do have conflict, because the fact that these two different workforces are, split up against each other within Metro is a way for the company to play us off each other, to put some conflict in there in order to drive down our wages and benefits, and has been quite successful at doing that. And we're talking about merging in a way that will create a industrial union. Congress of Industrial Organizations is what CIO stands for. And when we talk about one union, we're talking about an industrial union. One workplace, one union. So the final question we have here is, so what is the purpose, I should say it's kind of two questions in one. So what is the purpose of a petition to merge? And won't the leadership just not let that happen? Okay, so it is important to understand this is not the takeover method, this is the merger method. And in the merger method, it actually talks about approaching or being voluntary by the appropriate officials within these unions. So logically that makes sense to be the president of the ATU, the chairman of the TCU, the president of SMART, and so we already know, of course, that they all oppose the merger of these unions. So we need them to actually agree to make this happen. So the point of this petition is actually to put it to them. We're going around, we're getting a consensus or a census of the position of the membership. And if that position of the membership is in favor, in fact, of merging these unions, then we can take that petition, we can show it to the president, all these things to say, well, the membership is in favor of merging. And so we can put it to them. You oppose it, are you going to continue to oppose what is in the interests of the membership and what has been stated for what they want to have happen? Or are you going to stand completely counterposed to their interests and simply within your own narrow interests of your position at leadership that you wish to defend above all else against our own interests? And so that will help expose their position if they should continue to oppose. It's kind of, in that sense, either we actually win the merger, which of course is the best situation, or on the other situation, we're getting this ball rolling on fighting unions, even if it remains within the three separate unions, because we're challenging the way that these unions have been led and seeking to change, in fact, that whole situation. So that's the question also of, won't the leadership just not let it happen? Of course, we know they oppose it, but this is exactly how we're going to put pressure, put the feet to their fire, and expose them if they don't before the very membership. In fact, just collecting signatures so far has already started the ball rolling in that direction. There's already a lot of discussion going on. The leadership has already weighed in. Art Aguilar on the one hand from the ATU, I heard from TCU leadership at the TCU contract vote, and word is getting around and is already making them feel restless for good reasons in this case. So that has already gotten started. This petition is, of course, not the only thing that we're doing in the Committee for One Fighting Transit Union. For example, I'm going to run for shop steward and for conference delegate. So if you're in the ATU and you're watching this, please vote for me this year. And from within the position as shop steward and as conference delegate, I'm going to continue fighting for these changes. And hopefully, as we go on in the Committee for One Fighting Transit Union, other people will come in and step up and keep this fight going. You can also check out on our socials all the different leaflets that we have already put out that are trying to challenge this very situation and create one fighting transit union. Thanks for listening.
There's power in a factory.